How could you do this to me?
The ballroom, a shimmering tableau of ostentatious wealth and carefully cultivated smiles, erupted not in applause, but in a collective gigp that rippled through the gathered elite. Bradley Blackwell's champagne flute, still dangling carelessly between manicured fingers, was momentarily forgotten as a crimson tide streamed down Thomas's chest, staining the pristine white of his rented tuxedo. "Someone call the rental company," Bradley's voice, laced with a sneering arrogance, cut through the sudden hush. "This waiter needs a replacement." Cell phones rose like a flock of predatory birds, their lenses flashing, eager to capture the spectacle. Thomas, however, stood motionless, humiliation burning hotter than the wine stains, spreading across his chest, a public display of contempt that pierced far deeper than any liquid could. Harrison Blackwell, the family patriarch, a man whose presence commanded immediate deference, strode forward with the slow, deliberate grace of a predator. His manicured fingers, symbols of generational privilege, extracted a crisp $100 bill. With a calculated, dismissive gesture, he tucked it into Thomas's breast pocket, then patted his cheek twice, a gesture one might use to discipline a recalcitrant pet. "There's your trouble money," Harrison murmured, his voice thick with condescension. "Know your place." What they couldn't possibly know, shrouded as they were in their insulated world of inherited power, was that the man they had just so casually humiliated was no mere staff. He was Thomas Fisher, heir to Nexus Technologies, future Chief Innovation Officer, and as of tomorrow, the quiet force who would control the very $900 million future the Blackwells so desperately coveted. Thomas would not create a scene tonight. No. Tonight he would merely observe. Tomorrow he would orchestrate their downfall with the precision of a master conductor. Only 2 hours earlier, Thomas Fisher had stood before his apartment mirror, adjusting the bow tie on his rented tuxedo. His fingers trembled slightly, not from nervousness about the unfamiliar formal wear, but from the immense weight of responsibility resting on his young shoulders. Tonight marked his first high society appearance, representing Nexus Technologies, a delicate dance in the labyrinthine world of corporate alliances. His phone vibrated, an illuminated beacon of the world he was about to enter. "Dad" flashed on the screen, a reminder of the bedrock of his purpose. "The Blackwells will be there." His father's voice, direct and businesslike, came through the line from Tokyo, bridging continents and time zones. Their investment could accelerate our Asian expansion. "Make a good impression?" Thomas nodded, though his father couldn't see the silent affirmation. "I know. I've studied their portfolio." His father, James Fisher, a titan of industry, whose quiet innovation had reshaped global technology, softened his tone. "This isn't about portfolios, Thomas. They respect power, not potential. Remember what I taught you." Thomas recited the family mantra, a principle instilled in him since childhood. Value is in character, not capital. "Exactly," James affirmed. "Trust your judgment. This partnership is your call to make." Thomas ended the call and gazed at his reflection. Despite his father's phenomenal success and vast wealth, James had raised him with a deliberate, almost radical humility. There was no trust fund handed over, no nepotism-fueled ascent. Thomas had earned his position through sheer merit, beginning as a junior intern, working grueling 18-hour days to develop the revolutionary quantum processor that now defined Nexus's future. His talent and dedication had seen him rise steadily, now stepping into the pivotal role of Chief Innovation Officer. This self-made journey, a stark contrast to the inherited privilege he was about to encounter, had forged a quiet strength within him. At the gala, Thomas observed the ostentatious display from the entrance, a world apart from the focused simplicity of his lab. Crystal chandeliers, heavy with sparkling prisms, dripped light onto a sea of gold-flaked dinnerware. Champagne flowed like water from endless bottles, a river of excess. The Blackwell family held court near the center of the room, an island of perceived supremacy. Harrison, the imposing patriarch, was flanked by his children, Vanessa and Bradley. They critiqued guests' attire in stage whispers that carried just far enough to humiliate without seeming overtly intentional. Their laughter, brittle and sharp, punctuated the air. When Thomas, still a relative unknown to this particular social strata, attempted to approach and introduce himself, a burly security guard stepped forward. "Staff entrance is around back," the guard intoned, his voice flat with ingrained authority. "I'm a guest," Thomas replied, producing his invitation. The guard examined it skeptically, his gaze lingering on the rented tuxedo before he grudgingly stepped aside. As Thomas neared the Blackwell's circle, Harrison glanced his way, a dismissive flicker in his eyes, then whispered something to Bradley. Both chuckled. "New money," Harrison muttered, just loud enough for Thomas to hear, though seemingly aimed at no one in particular. "Standards aren't what they used to be." The comment, a subtle but potent jab, was a familiar weapon in the arsenal of the entitled. Thomas, understanding the game, retreated to observe from a distance. He watched Bradley berate a young waiter over champagne temperature, reducing the man to stammered apologies and nervous subservience. Later, Vanessa, with a flick of her designer-clad foot, accidentally tripped a busboy, then laughed, a high, tinkling sound, when dishes clattered to the floor, shattering on the polished marble. The staff moved with tight, forced smiles and fearful eyes, like prey animals, sensing predators in their midst. The Blackwells mocked a nobody tonight, blissfully unaware he would decide their billion-dollar fate tomorrow. This ingrained behavior, Thomas realized, wasn't just individual rudeness. It was a systemic expression of their worldview, a corporate philosophy in microcosm. The crowd migrated toward the auction stage as the gala transitioned to its fundraising phase. "Children's education," the auctioneer declared, the supposed noble cause behind tonight's excess. Thomas found a seat near the back, content to observe. The auctioneer, a former television personality with an unnervingly white smile, presented the first items: luxury vacations to secluded islands, celebrity meet and greets, exclusive club memberships that promised entry into even more rarefied circles. Thomas remained silent, his gaze steady, until a modest lot appeared on the screen. A weekend at a local vineyard, complete with a private tasting. 500, Thomas called out, his voice measured. The sum was reasonable, the cause worthy of support. Bradley Blackwell, who had been idly scrolling on his phone, turned in his seat, his eyes narrowing on Thomas. 5,000, he counted without hesitation, a casual 10-fold increase designed to dismiss. Thomas considered, then raised his paddle again. 5,500. Bradley stood, his champagne flute dangling, an extension of his arrogant posture. "Perhaps stick to items in your price range," he sneered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. 50,000. He winked at the appreciative titters that followed, a performance for his audience. The auctioneer's gavel fell with uncomfortable haste. "Sold to Mr. Blackwell." The next item appeared on screen, a digital rendering that shimmered with corporate promise. First commercial partnership rights for Nexus, technology's quantum processor. The room, moments ago filled with idle chatter, stilled. This wasn't a luxury trinket or a social perk. This was industry dominance, technological superiority, market transformation, the very engine of tomorrow's global economy. Harrison Blackwell rose slowly, deliberately, his every movement a calculated projection of power. 1 million, he announced, staring directly at Thomas as if issuing a personal challenge. Thomas remained perfectly still, a calm eye in the gathering storm. His phone vibrated in his pocket, a text from his father. Trust your judgment on partnerships. Your call to make. Remember our values. The message, short and potent, was a silent reinforcement of the principles that guided the Fisher empire. During the intermission, Vanessa Blackwell, champagne flute extended like a scepter, approached Thomas. You work at Nexus, right? She asked, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I thought I recognized you. Thomas accepted the drink with a nod. Yes, I do. I lead the processor development team. Vanessa laughed, a dismissive tinkle that cut him off mid-sentence. Adorable. We're actually meeting the Fisher heir tomorrow, the CEO's son, the actual decision-maker, not staff. She sipped her champagne, her eyes scanning the room for more important connections, her attention already drifting. I should go. Good luck with your career. Thomas smiled politely, a hint of steel beneath his placid expression. I hope your meeting goes well for everyone involved. Oh, it will. Vanessa tossed back her perfectly styled hair. My father always gets what he wants. Every dismissive word, every condescending glance, served as another nail in their corporate coffin, though they wouldn't understand why until tomorrow's meeting. Their confidence, Thomas observed, was built not on true insight, but on the brittle foundation of unquestioned privilege. Dinner service began with theatrical flourish, silver domes lifted in unison to reveal artfully arranged portions that prioritized presentation over sustenance. Thomas navigated toward his assigned table, tucked away in the far corner, a deliberate placement away from the Blackwells and other influential guests. Bradley intercepted him between tables, a glass of red wine swirling dangerously in his hand. Their shoulders brushed, a seemingly innocuous contact. The accident happened with practiced precision. Wine cascaded down Thomas's chest, the white shirt beneath his rental jacket transforming instantly to crimson. Conversations halted. All eyes turned. Someone call the rental company. Bradley's voice carried throughout the ballroom, filled with feigned exasperation. This waiter needs a replacement. Laughter rippled through the crowd, hesitant at first, then building as attendees realized the victim lacked the social capital to require their sympathy. Phones emerged, lenses flashing, photos snapping. Thomas stood immobilized, the cold liquid seeping through layers of fabric to his skin. The public humiliation, a calculated, deliberate act. Harrison Blackwell rose from his table, approaching with the slow, satisfied stride of a predator securing its prey. He reached into his pocket, extracting a crisp $100 bill with deliberate showmanship. He tucked it into Thomas's breast pocket, then patted his cheek twice, the gesture one would use to discipline a dog. There's a little something for your trouble, he said, his voice dropping, meant for Thomas alone. Know your place next time. A security guard appeared at Thomas's elbow, his presence a clear signal of dismissal. Sir, perhaps you should... He's with me. The voice, clear and resonant, belonged to an elderly woman, who materialized beside Thomas. Her posture radiated an undeniable authority, despite her small stature. "Eliza Thornton," she added for the security guard's benefit, her tone brooking no argument. The name worked like magic. The guard retreated immediately, melting back into the shadows. Eliza guided Thomas away from the spectacle, toward a quiet alcove, a sanctuary from the judgmental gazes. "The Blackwells have always been that way," she observed, her eyes sharp with long experience. "Old money, rotten attitudes. I knew your father when he was starting out. James would be appalled by their behavior." She studied his face, her gaze piercing. "You know who I am," Thomas said, dabbing at his ruined shirt with a napkin. "Of course, the Fisher eyes are unmistakable." Eliza smiled, a spark of mischief in her eyes. "They have no idea, do they?" Thomas shook his head. "I'd appreciate your discretion until tomorrow's meeting." Eliza's eyes sparkled. "I wouldn't miss that for the world." Across the room, the Blackwells celebrated their perceived dominance. Harrison held court, his voice carrying, oblivious to the strategic wheels already turning. "Once we control that processor technology, we'll crush our competition. The Fisher boy will fold. They always do. They lack the killer instinct." His words, filled with hubris, echoed the very arrogance Thomas had observed all evening. Thomas excused himself to the restroom, where he changed into the spare shirt kept in his car for emergencies. He studied his reflection, his father's eyes indeed, and remembered James Fisher's words. "Our technology should empower those who will use it responsibly, Thomas, not as a weapon for personal gain, but as a tool for progress." His phone rang, his father checking in from Tokyo. "How's the gala?" James asked, his voice calm, knowing his son well enough to anticipate the unsaid. "Educational," Thomas replied briefly, recounting the evening's events with a detached, clinical tone. A long pause followed, filled with unspoken understanding. "What are you thinking?" James asked finally, already knowing the answer. "I'm thinking we need to reconsider who we partner with," Thomas answered, his voice firm, unwavering. "I trust your judgment," his father said simply, his support absolute. "You have my full support." The wine stains, Thomas knew, would clean easily. The Blackwell's true colors, however, had permanently revealed themselves, etched into his memory, providing invaluable insight into their character. Thomas drove home in calculated silence, the city lights a blur of neon and chrome. Street lights strobed across his face as he navigated away from the Blackwell estate, but his knuckles didn't whiten on the steering wheel, nor did his breath quicken with anger. The classical music playing softly continued uninterrupted, a calm counterpoint to the storm brewing within. Only his eyes, those unmistakable Fisher eyes, betrayed the machinery of consequence now in motion behind them. The humiliation didn't matter. Not personally. What mattered was what it revealed about the Blackwells' character, about how they'd treat Nexus employees, about how they'd wield the processor technology his team had spent years developing, about who they truly were when they believed no one consequential was watching. Their arrogance had afforded him a rare, unvarnished glimpse into their corporate soul, and he found it wanting. His apartment felt stark after the gala's opulence, a quiet space for contemplation. Thomas didn't bother with lights. Standing by the window, he made 3 calls in succession, each a precise, deliberate step in his unfolding strategy. First, to Nexus's executive team, his assistant roused from sleep. "I need comprehensive reports on Blackwell Industries." Thomas's voice was calm, but held an undeniable edge. "Labor practices, environmental compliance, financial stability." everything. "Tonight, sir," his assistant protested gently, checking the time. "It's almost midnight." "Yes, tonight," Thomas countered, "and we have a 9 a.m. meeting that will determine the future of both companies. I need it now." The reports arrived within the hour, digital files meticulously compiled, a testament to Nexus's efficiency and the gravity of Thomas's request. Thomas scrolled through documented evidence of corners cut, safety violations hidden, employees silenced through NDRs, former workers alleging toxic environments, whistleblowers discredited, small companies bullied into submission or bankruptcy. Each swipe of his finger revealed another layer of rot beneath the polished Blackwell facade, a pattern of systemic exploitation that had been obscured by their power. His second call went to legal counsel. "Prepare termination clauses for any potential agreement with Blackwell Industries. I want maximum protection for our technology and staff." "Are we expecting problems?" the lawyer asked, a note of concern in her voice. "I'm ensuring we're prepared for all contingencies," Thomas replied, his tone leaving no room for further questions. His final call connected him to Tokyo again. His father listened without interruption as Thomas provided complete details of the evening's humiliation, not as a complaint, but as a strategic briefing. "They showed you who they are," James Fisher said finally, his voice calm. "Believe them." "I do," Thomas confirmed. "Their empire is built on intimidation and exploitation. It's a house of cards, waiting for a strong wind." "As my successor, this is your call," his father reminded him, a final act of trust and empowerment. "Whatever you decide, I'll back you completely." Across the city, in the opulent Blackwell mansion, Harrison gathered his children in his study, the rich scent of old leather and fine scotch filling the air. Crystal tumblers clinked as he toasted their imminent success. "The Nexus deal is practically signed," he announced, a satisfied smirk on his face. "Their CEO is still playing the humble visionary in Tokyo, leaving his precious son to handle negotiations." Bradley laughed, swirling his scotch. "Perfect setup." "That nobody we humiliated." "Classic power move, Dad," Vanessa added, her eyes glinting with admiration. Harrison nodded approvingly. "Perfect example of why people like us stay on top. Connections matter more than competence. It's about knowing which buttons to push, which lines to cross." Bradley scrolled through his phone, showing his father the photos of wine-soaked Thomas, already being prepped for public consumption. "Sent these to our PR team. We'll leak them after the contract signing. A little reminder of the natural hierarchy." Vanessa sipped her scotch, already envisioning the victory. "Tomorrow we meet the Fisher heir and wrap him around our finger." Another trophy for the collection. Their confidence was boundless, a perfect storm of hubris and ignorance. Back in his apartment, Thomas stood at his window, looking toward the glittering Blackwell Tower dominating the skyline, a stark symbol of the effort he was about to dismantle. Inside that building, he knew, thousands of employees feared daily humiliation from people who viewed power as a weapon rather than a sacred responsibility. His decision crystallized into a silent, unwavering vow. The Blackwells would never touch his family's technology, nor would they ever have dominion over his people. By sunrise, Thomas held all the cards. By sunset, the Blackwells wouldn't even be in the game. The coming dawn would usher in not just a new day, but a new era, defined by character, not capital. Nexus Technologies' headquarters gleamed in the morning sun, its curved glass exterior reflecting the city awakening around it. Thomas arrived at 7 a.m., 2 hours before the scheduled meeting, pristine in a tailored suit that cost more than his entire rental wardrobe from the previous night. Today wasn't about humility. It was about authority, about setting a new standard. The executive team assembled in the conference room. Coffee steamed from porcelain cups, and pastries arranged on silver trays remained untouched, their allure lost to the palpable tension charging the air. 2 contract options, the chief financial officer stated, examining the identical folders placed at Harrison Blackwell's designated seat. I don't understand. Insurance, Thomas explained, straightening his father's company pin on his lapel. The first offers partnership under our standard terms. The second. His voice trailed off as he glanced out the window. 3 black SUVs, sleek and imposing, pulled into the reserved parking spaces below. The Blackwells had arrived 15 minutes early, a classic power play meant to unbalance their opponent. Thomas smiled thinly. Let them wait in reception for exactly 14 minutes, then bring them up. The Blackwells made their entrance like visiting royalty, a grand procession of entitlement. Harrison's custom Italian shoes clicked authoritatively across the marble lobby, a staccato rhythm of self-importance. Vanessa's designer perfume announced her presence seconds before she appeared, a cloud of expensive fragrance preceding her. Bradley, ever absorbed, scrolled through his phone, periodically chuckling at something on the screen. Coffee? Harrison demanded of the receptionist, without looking up from signing in. When she returned with a steaming cup, he took 1 sip, then grimaced. Is this the best you have? The receptionist, a picture of professional calm, responded, her smile unwavering. The CEO's son will be with you shortly, sir. I bet he makes us wait on purpose, Vanessa sighed, examining her flawless manicure. These tech types always play power games to compensate for their social awkwardness. Did you see this? Bradley turned his phone toward his father, displaying the wine-stained waiter photo, already circulating on several gossip blogs with mocking captions. Harrison's laugh echoed through the reception area, a guttural sound of triumph. By noon, we'll own the future of computing. Their confidence, built on a foundation of misjudgment, was absolute. Inside the boardroom, Thomas received a final email. The complete background report on Blackwell Industries. Their $900 million valuation, he noted, rested on projected earnings that depended entirely on securing cutting-edge technology like Nexus's quantum processor. Without it, their empire stood on quicksand, an illusion of stability that masked deep structural vulnerabilities. The Blackwells are ready, sir, the receptionist's voice came through the intercom. Thomas straightened his tie, centered the contract folders with deliberate precision, and nodded. Send them in. The doors swung open. The Blackwells entered, business smiles firmly in place, ready to conquer. Then they froze, mid-step, as recognition dawned. Good morning, Thomas said calmly, his voice ringing with a newfound authority. I believe we've already met. Their expressions shifted, a horrifying tableau, from confusion to dawning horror, as 3 generations of wealth and influence suddenly hung by a thread, caught in a trap of their own making. Harrison recovered first, his political reflexes kicking in with the speed of a seasoned operator. His expression cycled through shock, calculation, and false warmth in under 2 seconds. He forced a laugh that sounded like glass breaking, a desperate attempt to diffuse the tension. Thomas! What a misunderstanding last night. He stepped forward, hand extended, as if nothing had happened, as if he could simply erase the memory of his public contempt. We had no idea you were the waiter, Thomas finished, his voice level, refusing the offered hand. "Or the CEO's son you're here to negotiate with." Bradley's fingers moved frantically across his phone screen, desperately trying to delete the photos already circulating online. A futile attempt to scrub away their digital footprint of arrogance. Vanessa's perfect posture crumbled slightly, her shoulders curving inward as if to make herself smaller, her polished facade cracking under the weight of the revelation. Harrison pivoted smoothly, his recovery remarkable. "Your humility is remarkable," he gushed, sliding into a chair without waiting for an invitation. "That's exactly the kind of leadership we respect at Blackwell Industries. Your father must be proud." Thomas didn't acknowledge the hollow compliment. He activated the wall screen behind him. Technical specifications, market projections, and implementation timelines for Nexus's revolutionary processor appeared in sequence. He presented its quantum architecture, its unparalleled energy efficiency, its market-transforming potential with clinical precision. A master craftsman detailing his magnum opus. "Our technology represents a paradigm shift," Thomas explained, his voice devoid of emotion. "Companies that implement it will dominate their sectors for at least 5 years. Those without access will struggle to remain competitive, facing a future of rapid obsolescence." The Blackwells leaned forward in perfect synchronization, their predatory instincts overriding their earlier discomfort. Harrison's eyes reflected dollar signs, seeing a vast fortune within reach. Vanessa calculated social capital, already envisioning the increased prestige. Bradley envisioned crushing competitors, feeding his insatiable desire for dominance. "We're prepared to offer exclusivity for the first year," Thomas continued, sliding a folder across the polished table toward Harrison. "All the terms are outlined here." While Harrison greedily reviewed the contract, Vanessa attempted a clumsy act of damage control. "I've always admired the Fisher family vision," she offered, her voice honeyed, utterly devoid of sincerity. "Your father's rise is legendary, and now your innovations—" She trailed off as Thomas's expression remained impassive, betraying nothing. Harrison looked up from the contract, beaming, his face a mask of triumph. "These terms are acceptable. We can sign today." "Before we do," Thomas interjected, his voice still measured, "I'd like to discuss something from our background research." He pulled out a file, thick with documented reports of Blackwell's labor violations, environmental negligence, and predatory business practices. "This gives me pause." The temperature in the room seemed to drop, the atmosphere thick with unspoken dread. Harrison's smile hardened, a grimace of thinly veiled contempt. "Industry standard practices," he dismissed with a casual wave of his hand. "The cost of staying competitive in today's market." "I understand," Thomas replied, his gaze unwavering. "That information certainly informs our decision." He took back the first folder, and with a deliberate, slow motion, slid forward the second one. "This is our revised offer." The second contract wasn't a partnership offer. It was an extinction-level event disguised as legal language. Harrison scanned the new document, his professional mask slipping with each damning paragraph. His complexion reddened from collar to hairline, a vein pulsing visibly at his temple. "This is outrageous!" He slammed the contract down, the sound echoing through the suddenly silent room. "These terms would give you oversight of our internal operations, mandatory ethics training, and a complete restructuring of our management." "Those are our conditions for partnership," Thomas stated, his voice remaining measured despite the room's rising tension. "My father fully supports this position. It reflects the values Nexus was built upon." Vanessa snatched the document, her eyes darting frantically across the dense text. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide her growing panic. "You can't possibly expect us to agree to this." "You're right," Thomas agreed, the first genuine confirmation he'd offered. "I don't expect you to agree. This meeting isn't about securing your partnership. It's about informing you that Nexus will be partnering exclusively with your 3 largest competitors instead." The words landed like physical blows. Harrison's face drained of color as he calculated the immediate implications. Without access to Nexus's groundbreaking technology, Blackwell Industries would become obsolete overnight. Their inflated $900 million valuation, built on projected future earnings, would collapse. Investors would flee. Their empire, the legacy of 3 generations of ruthless acquisition and inherited wealth, would disintegrate. "You're making a mistake." Harrison's voice dropped to a threatening whisper, a desperate attempt to regain control. "The Blackwells have friends in every industry. One word from..." "About what?" Thomas interrupted, his voice calm, cutting through the bluster. "About how you treated someone you thought was beneath you. Please share that story widely. I welcome it." Bradley, silent until now, slammed his fist against the polished table. "This is personal. You're destroying a billion-dollar company over a spilled drink." "No," Thomas corrected, his gaze direct and unflinching. "I'm choosing not to empower people who've demonstrated how they use power. The spilled drink just showed me who you really are. It revealed the rot at the core of your operation." Harrison stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor, resorting to his final, most primal tactic: raw financial power. "Name your price, everyone has one." His eyes narrowed, a desperate glint in them. "Or does Daddy need to approve that, too?" Thomas rose to meet him, eye to eye, an equal in stature and conviction. "My father taught me that some things aren't for sale, Mr. Blackwell. Like integrity." He reached into his pocket and, with a quiet finality, placed Harrison's $100 bill on the table. "I'm returning your tip." The meeting is over. The Blackwells had come to acquire technology, but they had failed to recognize the most dangerous innovation in the room: principled power. The Blackwells gathered their belongings in stiff mechanical movements, their composure shattered. Harrison's shoulders remained rigid with suppressed rage. Bradley repeatedly loosened and tightened his tie as if it were strangling him, a physical manifestation of his choked anger. Vanessa's manicured fingernails tapped an anxious rhythm against her leather portfolio, a nervous tattoo of impending doom. The door opened. Thomas's assistant entered with practiced efficiency. "Sir, your father is on the line from Tokyo. The Thornton Group, Rivera Enterprises, and Fujimoto Technologies have all confirmed their participation in the Joint Development Program." Thomas nodded, revealing nothing in his expression. "Perfect timing. Please inform my father that we'll announce the collaboration at today's press conference as planned." The Blackwells froze mid-motion, their faces slack with disbelief. "Press conference?" Harrison's voice cracked slightly, a tremor of pure fear. "Yes." Thomas checked his watch. "In 1 hour, my father and I will jointly announce our strategic partnerships and our new industry ethics initiative from our Tokyo and New York offices." He met Harrison's gaze directly, a challenge in his eyes. "You're welcome to stay and watch. The industry is about to change direction." As the Blackwells moved reluctantly toward the exit, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway, blocking their path. Eliza Thornton stood there, her diminutive stature somehow filling the space with an undeniable authority. Harrison's face contorted with confusion, then dawning comprehension, a mosaic of panic. You two know each other? Eliza was my doctoral advisor at MIT, Thomas explained, his voice calm. She recognized the potential in my processor design when I was still a graduate student. The truth crashed down on the Blackwells with devastating clarity. Thomas wasn't merely the CEO's son, the heir to Nexus. He was the actual inventor of the revolutionary quantum processor technology, the brilliant architect of the innovation they had so desperately pursued. The realization transformed their understanding of last night's humiliation from an amusing power play into an existential business catastrophe of epic proportions. And I introduced him to his father's board when they were looking for innovation leadership, Eliza added, a smile playing on her lips that didn't quite reach her eyes. The tech world is smaller than you think, Harrison. Thomas moved to the wall screen, activating a presentation none of the Blackwells had seen before. The processor technology isn't just another innovation. It's a complete paradigm shift. The screen displayed integration paths across multiple industries, revealing the technology's true scope and transformative power. It will become the industry standard within 18 months. Companies without access will become essentially obsolete. He advanced to the next slide. Furthermore, the ethics initiative I've developed establishes new standards for labor practices, environmental responsibility, and corporate governance across the tech sector. The screen showed dozens of company logos, major players in every technological field, already on board. These companies have already signed preliminary agreements to participate. Compliance will be voluntary, Thomas explained, his tone suggesting the opposite. But companies that don't participate won't have access to the joint development platform, and therefore will be left behind. Harrison's expression crumbled from anger to naked desperation as he realized the true magnitude of his mistake. This wasn't merely losing a contract, it was systematic exclusion from the future of the entire industry. "You can't do this," he whispered, his voice stripped of its usual command, a hollow plea. "I'm not doing anything to you," Thomas responded evenly, his voice betraying no emotion. "I'm building the future with partners who share our values. Your exclusion is entirely self-inflicted." Security appeared at the doorway, not to escort Thomas out, as they had attempted at the gala, but to remove the Blackwells from Nexus headquarters. Harrison made one final desperate attempt to salvage his crumbling empire. "Your father's board members are friends of mine," he threatened, his voice rising, regaining a hint of its old menace. "They'll hear about this abuse of power, this vendetta." Thomas didn't flinch. The board unanimously approved this direction this morning after hearing what happened last night. They've seen the same reports on Blackwell Industries that I have. His voice remained calm, but carried an unmistakable weight of finality. "No one wants to partner with a company that treats people, any people, the way you do." As security guided the Blackwells from the room, their faces ashen, Thomas turned to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He activated his video call to Tokyo, where his father waited, ready to jointly announce the partnerships that would reshape the industry and exclude the Blackwell empire from its future. On a screen in the lobby, financial news already reported unusual activity in Blackwell Industries stock, a slight tremor before the earthquake to come. By the time the Blackwells reached their vehicles, their phones would be flooding with panicked messages from board members, investors, and partners. By market close, hundreds of millions in value would have evaporated. All because they mocked the wrong waiter at a charity gala. As the elevator doors closed on the Blackwells' ashen faces, their empire had already begun its free fall. The press conference unfolded with military precision. On dual screens, Thomas in New York and James Fisher in Tokyo, presented a united front despite being separated by thousands of miles. The Nexus logo pulsed softly behind them both, a visual reminder of their technological dominance and the strong family connection at its core. "Today marks a new chapter in technological innovation," James began, his authoritative voice carrying despite the distance, a calming presence in the burgeoning storm. Thomas continued seamlessly. "Nexus Technologies is proud to announce exclusive development partnerships with Thornton Group, Rivera Enterprises, and Fujimoto Technologies for implementation of our quantum processor architecture." Financial analysts in the audience immediately began typing furiously on their devices, recognizing the seismic shift underway. These partnerships, connecting 4 major players across 3 continents, represented an unprecedented realignment of power in the technology landscape. Thomas didn't mention the Blackwells directly when introducing the Industry Ethics Initiative. He didn't need to. His emphasis spoke volumes. Technology is power, and power must be wielded responsibly by those who respect everyone, regardless of position or background. The corporate execution happened with breathtaking speed. Within 20 minutes of the announcement, Blackwell Industries' stock dropped 15%, triggering automatic trading halts, a circuit breaker against catastrophe. When trading resumed, the freefall continued, relentless and unforgiving. By lunch, they'd lost 40% of their market value. Nearly $360 million evaporated in 3 hours. Financial news networks switched to continuous coverage of the Blackwell collapse. Analysts who'd praised Harrison's business acumen that morning now dissected his company's structural vulnerabilities with surgical precision. Blackwell Industries built their entire forward strategy on securing next-generation processing capabilities, explained a technology analyst on Market Watch, his tone grim. Without access to Nexus's architecture, their product pipeline effectively becomes obsolete before launch. They've been locked out of the future. Another analyst was more blunt. They bought into the myth of their own indispensability, and it cost them everything. Bradley's photo of wine-soaked Thomas appeared on gossip sites exactly as planned, but with a context the Blackwells never anticipated. Headlines transformed overnight, becoming a testament to Thomas's principled stand. Humility in leadership, Nexus Air endured mockery before business triumph. Tech Prince in disguise, how Thomas Fisher let actions speak louder than name. The $900 million mistake. Blackwells mocked the wrong waiter. Comments flooded in, supporting the humble CEO's son against the entitled billionaire family. The narrative wrote itself, a morality tale for the digital age, about judging people by their character rather than their clothes, a powerful counter-narrative to the Blackwell's carefully curated image. At Blackwell headquarters, chaos reigned. Harrison barricaded himself in his office, blinds drawn, refusing all calls except from board members and major investors, all demanding the same explanations he couldn't provide. How had he misread the situation so catastrophically? How had he failed to recognize Thomas Fisher, the quiet force poised to change the industry? Why didn't their research team identify him before the gala? Vanessa managed crisis communications with increasing desperation. Each statement she issued was immediately undermined by former employees flooding social media with stories of Blackwell's toxic culture, emboldened by the company's sudden vulnerability. They made me work 100-hour weeks, then fired me when I requested time off for my child's surgery, wrote a former developer, his words sparking a wave of similar testimonies. Harrison Blackwell told me personally that ethics are for companies that can't compete on innovation, revealed a former executive, exposing the deep-seated rot. Bradley attempted damage control on the personal front, calling in favors from media contacts to kill the wine-spilling story. His efforts only amplified it. Each attempted suppression generated new headlines about the Blackwells' attempts to control the narrative, backfiring spectacularly. By mid-afternoon, law firms began announcing class action lawsuits against Blackwell Industries on behalf of shareholders. The legal language was precise, devastating, materially misleading statements, failure to disclose significant business risks. At Nexus headquarters, Thomas received hourly updates on the fallout, but showed no satisfaction in the Blackwells' destruction. When his assistant remarked on how quickly their empire was crumbling, Thomas responded quietly, "This isn't about punishment. It's about consequences." The consequences continued mounting. Documents leaked, showing Harrison instructed managers to work them until they break, then replace them. Internal emails revealed systematic suppression of safety concerns to meet production deadlines. Financial records exposed accounting practices that bordered on fraud. Each revelation drove Blackwell's stock lower, an unstoppable descent. By market close, their $900 million valuation had contracted to barely $300 million, with no floor in sight. Across the technology sector, companies rushed to announce new ethics policies and workplace improvements. No one wanted to be the next Blackwell, a stark warning to the industry. The ethics initiative Thomas introduced that morning gained signatories by the hour, companies eager to demonstrate they belonged on the right side of the new divide. Meanwhile, Nexus stock surged, adding billions to its market cap. Financial analysts upgraded their growth projections based on the strategic partnerships announced. Thomas Fisher's name trended globally. Industry publications rushed to profile the hidden genius behind Nexus's quantum architecture, acknowledging his quiet revolution. The most devastating blow came at sunset. The Blackwell Industries board called for an emergency shareholder meeting to address leadership concerns and strategic direction. The corporate euphemism didn't disguise their intent. Harrison Blackwell's reign was ending, brought down by his own hubris. In his Tokyo hotel, James Fisher watched the financial bloodbath unfold on multiple screens. He called his son as markets closed. "You've transformed the industry in a day," he observed, his voice measured, filled with quiet pride. "It wasn't my intent to destroy them," Thomas replied, looking out at the New York skyline. "No, your intent was to protect our technology from misuse." James paused. "Their destruction is self-inflicted. They built an empire on exploitation. It was always going to collapse." Thomas stared out at the New York skyline, the Blackwell Tower's lights dimmer than usual against the darkening sky. "Does that make this right?" "Right and easy aren't the same thing," his father answered, the wisdom of decades in business distilled into a single thought. "Power reveals character, theirs and yours. I'm proud of how you've wielded it." As nightfall, Blackwell Industries' legal team worked frantically to prepare for the shareholder revolt. Their strategy centered on a single, desperate argument. Thomas Fisher pursued a personal vendetta against the Blackwells, abusing his position to orchestrate their downfall. What they didn't yet understand was that character assassination requires your target to have vulnerable character. By morning, they'd discover their final miscalculation. Thomas Fisher's reputation for integrity made him virtually unassailable. The empire the Blackwells spent generations building continued its collapse through the night. Board members privately contacted headhunters to explore new opportunities. Employees updated resumes. Partners quietly initiated contract exit clauses, all while Harrison Blackwell sat alone in his office, staring at a $100 bill, returned to him by a waiter who turned out to be holding all the cards. The Blackwells prepared for every business contingency except the cost of their own character. Mourning brought no mercy to the Blackwells. Their family name, once a symbol of power and prestige, now dominated headlines for all the wrong reasons. Blackwell board revolts, emergency shareholder meeting called. Ethics scandal deepens, more employees speak out against Blackwell regime. Market massacre, Blackwell Industries loses 68% of value in 24 hours. The Blackwell family arrived at their own corporate headquarters, like unwelcome intruders. Security guards, the same men who once jumped at Harrison's smallest gesture, now checked their identification cards with exaggerated thoroughness, a subtle but potent act of disrespect. Executive assistants who previously competed for Harrison's approval now avoided eye contact, scurrying away when the family approached, as if fearing contagion. The boardroom, Harrison's former kingdom, had transformed into a tribunal. Board members and major shareholders sat in grim formation, faces set with the unique expression of wealthy people confronting significant financial loss. The Blackwell family portraits that once dominated the walls had already been removed, leaving conspicuous empty spaces, symbolic voids. The board chair, formerly Harrison's golf partner, opened the meeting with brutal directness. Blackwell Industries has lost 68% of its value in 1 week. Our partnerships are dissolving. We face multiple lawsuits from shareholders, former employees, and environmental groups. We're here to determine next steps. Harrison projected confidence he didn't feel, his voice booming as if volume might compensate for his precarious position. The market is overreacting to temporary setbacks. We'll secure alternative technology. We've already initiated discussions with— "No one's taking your calls, Harrison," interrupted the board chair, his tone devoid of any former camaraderie. "I checked. The Fisher vendetta is personal, not business," Harrison insisted, desperation leaking into his tone. "We can challenge the Nexus partnerships on antitrust grounds. My legal team is already—" "Your legal team resigned this morning," another board member cut in, his words landing like a hammer blow. "All of them." A woman rose from the far end of the table, unfamiliar to the Blackwells, wearing the understated expensive clothing of the truly wealthy. "Actually, it appears to be both personal and business," she announced, her voice calm and authoritative. "I represent Meridian Investment Group. We've received a purchase offer for our shares from a consortium led by the Thornton Group." The room erupted as more shareholders confirmed similar offers, all above market value despite the stock's collapse. "This is a coordinated hostile takeover," Harrison shouted, his face purpling with rage and fear. The board chair looked grim. "The offers are contingent on leadership changes." "You can't remove me," Harrison snarled, his voice raw. "I built this company." "I am this company." The final blow came from their own legal counsel, not the resigned team, but the corporation's outside firm. A silver-haired attorney presented evidence that Harrison and his children had violated fiduciary duty by misrepresenting the company's ethical compliance and hiding lawsuit settlements from the board. "The board has legal grounds for immediate removal," he explained dispassionately. "The evidence suggests willful misconduct." A vote was called. The results were overwhelming. The Blackwell family was removed from all operational roles, maintaining only their significantly devalued shares. Harrison's kingdom, built over 3 generations, collapsed in a 15-minute vote, a stark demonstration of how quickly the tide can turn. As they left the boardroom, fired from their own company, they passed a television in the lobby. The screen showed Thomas at the opening of a new Nexus research center, focused on ethical technology development. He looked directly into the camera, though his words weren't aimed at the Blackwells specifically. "We build technology to elevate humanity, not exploit it." Outside, reporters swarmed the disgraced family, microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing. Harrison's legendary self-control finally shattered. He shoved a cameraman, creating one final damaging image of Blackwell entitlement, a moment of raw, unvarnished rage. The footage would lead evening news broadcasts worldwide. In their limousine, silence reigned, heavy and suffocating. The privacy partition remained closed, but the driver could still hear Bradley's whispered question. "What do we do now?" Harrison had no answer as they drove away from the empire they lost. Not in years, but in seconds. The $100 bill he'd given Thomas as a tip sat in his pocket, returned to Bultatu, him like a curse, now worth more than his remaining dignity. While the Blackwells descended into irrelevance, Thomas ascended to reshape an industry in his ethical image. 6 months transformed the technology landscape completely. Thomas led a panel discussion at the Global Technology Forum, the industry's most prestigious gathering. CEOs from major companies, including the restructured Blackwell Industries under new ethical leadership, listened attentively as he outlined ethical implementation frameworks. Graphs behind him showed dramatic improvements in workplace satisfaction, environmental compliance, and innovation metrics across participating companies. "The data is unambiguous," Thomas explained, his laser pointer highlighting correlation curves. "Ethical business practices don't merely feel better, they perform better. They attract better talent, foster greater innovation, and build more resilient companies." The audience, a mix of seasoned executives and young disruptors, included Eliza Thornton and other industry veterans who nodded approvingly. Near the back, James Fisher watched his son with quiet pride, having transitioned to an advisory role after 30 years at Nexus's helm, content to see his legacy carried forward by a new generation. Industry news outlets that once fetishized growth at any cost now featured regular ethics index updates. Headlines tracked companies joining the initiative. Tech titan Philips joins ethics initiative. Stock jumps 12%. Revolutionary standards, how the Fisher framework is transforming tech. Ethical technology, trend or new normal. A respected business journal published a comprehensive analysis demonstrating that companies joining the ethics initiative outperformed market averages by significant margins. The article concluded, "What began as moral leadership has become sound business strategy, proving that integrity is not a cost, but an investment." At Nexus headquarters, Thomas mentored young engineers from diverse backgrounds, fostering an inclusive environment. In the company's innovation lab, he sat with a group of recent graduates from underrepresented communities. "How do you handle discrimination in this industry?" asked a young woman, her expression suggesting personal experience with the question. Thomas shared his gala experience without bitterness, his tone matter-of-fact rather than self-pitying. "People will judge you by their standards, not your worth," he told them. "Your job isn't to match their standards, it's to transform them. Not through arguments, but through achievement, through demonstrating a better way." Former Blackwell employees found positions at companies within the new ethical framework. Exit interviews revealed improved work environments and mental health across the board. Productivity rose. Innovation accelerated. Employee turnover plummeted. One emotional interview featured a former Blackwell manager who spoke with a trembling voice about the previous regime. "I was forced to mistreat my team." Harrison would say, "Either they break or you do." I thought that's just how business worked. He straightened, his eyes clearing. "Now I know better. I can succeed without destroying others." The quantum processor technology revolutionized the industry as predicted. Rather than creating monopolies, the joint development platform fostered unprecedented collaboration. Companies built upon each other's innovations, creating applications that would have been impossible under the old competitive model, unlocking new frontiers of human potential. A brief news segment showed Harrison Blackwell attempting to launch a new venture. Potential investors listened politely to his pitch, then declined with practiced regret. Doors that once opened automatically for the Blackwell name now remained firmly closed. The family hadn't just lost an empire, they'd become a cautionary tale, taught in business schools as a prime example of how not to lead. Meanwhile, Thomas's approach gained institutional momentum. Universities revised business curricula to include ethical leadership modules. Venture capital firms incorporated ethics scoring in their investment criteria, shifting the very definition of a good investment. Regulatory bodies adopted standards from the initiative as compliance benchmarks. The systemic transformation continued, unstoppable now, spreading beyond technology into adjacent industries, a ripple effect from one man's principled stand. 6 months after the humiliation that changed everything, an unexpected visitor requested a meeting with Thomas. Thomas sat in his office reviewing quarterly reports. Nexus's growth continued to exceed projections, but the metrics that truly satisfied him appeared on the second page. Industry-wide improvements in labor practices, environmental standards, and ethical compliance. The revolution he sparked had taken on a momentum beyond any single company or leader, a testament to the power of a shared vision. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Sir, there's someone here without an appointment. Vanessa Blackwell." Thomas paused, considering. "Send her in." Vanessa entered, transformed from their last encounter. Gone were the designer clothes, the calculated posture, the rehearsed charm. She wore simple business attire, her previously perfect hair now cut in a practical style, her expression stripped of artifice, replaced by a quiet earnestness. "Thank you for seeing me," she began, remaining standing until Thomas gestured toward a chair. "I'm not here on family business." "Why are you here?" Thomas asked, direct but not unkind. Vanessa explained that after losing their positions, each Blackwell family member responded differently to their downfall. Harrison retreated to their remaining estate, bitter and unchanged, obsessively plotting impossible comebacks. Bradley fled to Europe to escape the scandal, living off distant relatives while posting carefully curated social media, suggesting his life remained unchanged, a hollow pretense. "And you?" Thomas asked. "I started listening," Vanessa admitted, her eyes steady for the first time. "To former employees, to industry leaders like you and your father. I realized our family built wealth by devaluing others. We measured success in dollars, not impact." She had started a small foundation focused on worker rights and education access, funded by selling her personal assets, severing ties with the past. She didn't ask for forgiveness or opportunity, only a chance to learn from her mistakes and perhaps eventually make meaningful amends. Thomas studied her, searching for manipulation and finding none. "True power isn't about controlling others," he said finally. "My father always taught me it's about elevating everyone around you." The strongest leaders create more leaders, not more followers. Later, at a small coffee shop near Nexus headquarters, Thomas chatted with the barista, the same young man Bradley Blackwell had berated at the gala for bringing the wrong champagne. Now he attended college on a Nexus scholarship, part of Thomas's quiet initiative to support service workers pursuing education. "Any regrets about how things played out with the Blackwells?" the student asked while making Thomas's coffee. "The business blogs still talk about it. The waiter's revenge, they call it." Thomas considered this. "I don't celebrate their downfall," he said finally. "I celebrate the system becoming more just. There's a difference." The student handed him his coffee with a smile. "On the house today, boss." Thomas insisted on tea. "I value the work you do," he said, leaving a generous tip. Outside, Thomas passed a newsstand featuring a business magazine with him and his father on the cover, headlined, "The Fisher Legacy: How Father and Son Changed Tech Culture." He didn't stop to look at it. The true measure of his success wasn't on magazine covers or in stock prices. It was in the former Blackwell employees now thriving in ethical workplaces. It was in the scholarship students building futures that once seemed impossible. It was in the shift from technology as a weapon of market dominance to a tool for human advancement. As Thomas walked back toward Nexus headquarters, his phone buzzed with a message from his father. "Character builds empires. Cruelty destroys them." Thomas smiled slightly, tucking the phone away. The lesson wasn't new. His father had taught it through example his entire life. The difference was that now an entire industry had learned it too, not through preaching, but through consequence. Some lessons must be experienced to be understood. The Blackwells learned this the hard way. Thomas hoped others won't need such expensive tuition.